Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Battle for Azeroth video. Today we've got something that is actually more exciting than I initially thought it would be. And just before we hop into the main content, there's been quite a lot of news from BlizzCon, and I've got one handy playlist which will just condense that all into one location for you. So, with that said, let's get into the video. Battle for Azeroth is attempting to fundamentally shake up player versus player content, though with a different approach to what we've seen in the past. One that will hopefully appeal to those who really enjoyed the older PvP experiences that the game have to offer. And when I say older, I mean 10 plus years ago, so really going far back. They're also going to be changing up how gearing and stat templates work, which is something that I think many of the current PvP players will be quite excited by. So let's cover the big news first. PvP and PvE servers, they'll no longer exist as a concept. As times went on, the idea of a single server has mattered less and less for the game, and the faction balances between servers have also got quite extreme. Mixing in systems like cross-realm zones and stuff like that, Blizzard have always found that whenever they try to discuss doing world PvP, it was just really hard to get it to work. So, the new system aims to fix this, and this is how the new system works. You just opt into it. It's pretty much as simple as that. When you opt into world PvP, you are essentially phased into a PvP shard. Now, the important thing here is that you can only do that opt-in, opt-out process in a city like Stormwind. So, for players who do not want world PvP to be an element of their game, you'll see zero difference at all. And if you do want world PvP to be a part of your game, then you just opt in and, well, the game pretty much moves you over to a PvP server shard, you get phased over, and then when you leave Stormwind, you're out into a more dangerous world. Doing it this way means that we should actually see a degree of faction balance, and then, since it's a 100% opt-in process, it will never get in the way of regular players. The choice of a PvE and PvP server right now is something you do when you make a character. Well, in the future, you'll just be able to head to Stormwind and say, you know what, I want to try going into the world in PvP mode this time, and you'll get a different gameplay experience. Now, one interesting thing is they do plan to have some bonuses for people who select PvP. Now, this is not intended to be a lucrative, optimal way of playing the game. Basically, it's meant to compensate for the natural time inefficiency of playing with world PvP turned on. It seems like this could be extending to things like experience, but we do not 100% know. This is actually the one thing I'm a little bit worried about in terms of getting the balance right, but look, there'll be plenty of time in beta to work this thing out, so I'm happy to leave that for now. So Blizzard's goal with this world PvP thing has been to set up the conditions to make it a viable category of content for the game, and in doing this, they open up new opportunities for game development. The examples that they gave are quite cool. Assassination missions, bounty hunting, things like that. Some add-ons have actually attempted to do this in the past, so seeing it in-game would be pretty damn cool, especially if it has its own reward scheme. For me, I really think that world PvP, combined with systems like those ones, could lead to a game that, for the PvP players, is a lot longer lasting. It would essentially give the game a sandbox-like appeal for those who want the world PvP content, in the same way that you have games like EVE Online, which are just a sandbox system. While this would never come close to being that much of a sandbox, it does sort of support more replayable content. Now, what I would personally love is if Blizzard set up flashpoints, almost something like South Shore and Tarren Mill. You could have these be sort of rolling PvP world events where factions could fight over certain objectives for a loot bounty at the end. That's just one suggestion, but the important thing to take away from this is that in establishing a good world PvP system, Blizzard open up the possibility of new types of content, and I think that's a very exciting prospect indeed. Hopping a little bit backwards to Legion-related stuff, gear and stats have been a very contentious issue. They said at BlizzCon that they think the Legion systems were too much of an overcorrection. Now, sure, the balance offered by the stat templates has helped in some ways, but it's meant that players have little control over their stats, and not everyone likes that. So they are going to re-examine how this operates in the next expansion, with the goal being to give you more control over your character. And they've actually said that doing this would involve changing PvP gearing, as the current random-based system is not very good for targeting stats. Really, this does seem like wonderful news for the current PvP community, so it's definitely something that I'm happy to hear about. They also talked about world PvP balance and basically how rubbish it is in Legion. Essentially, their goal moving forward is to have one consistent rule set in regular and world PvP. your character should not feel radically different if a player starts attacking you out in the world. So in order to manage power gaps, they want to use some of the scaling techniques, basically the same techniques that allow, say, a level 103, 106, and 110 player to fight the same mob in the Legion world. Now, they're not doing this to level players' power, they're just doing it to slightly decrease the gap so that you've got less of those Legion-like situations where you can almost one-shot people out in the open world. And finally, let's just hop back to the more traditional PvP game modes. So they are adding a new battleground in Silithis. This is going to cover the immediate power struggle over Azerite, and the good news is, it's coming in Legion, not Battle for Azeroth. This map is going to be a dynamic capture and hold map. Basically, there are, I think, 9 potential Azerite nodes, 3 of them will be active at any time, and what you need to do is essentially capture and hold the active ones, a bit like Arithai Basin, just, well, dynamic. Ideally, the spawns should mean that this battleground will feel fresh for longer and that you'll have to think on your feet a little bit more. Then we're also getting 2 new arenas, one in Zuldazar and one in Tiragard, and some other nice news is that the Brawls feature is going to be continued into Battle for Azeroth. That's something that I'm very happy about. As someone who is happy to, casually dabble in a bit of PvP, I really love that feature. So overall, what do I think about this? Well, not a massive amount of new PvP content in terms of battlegrounds and arenas, maybe we'll see more, but this world PvP thing is potentially interesting to me. I'm perhaps less interested in a 2v2, 3v3 arena, but if they can have world PvP systems that have a bit of a sandbox element to them in that, it's systems that can be applied worldwide that will naturally encourage players to fight each other for rewards, I think that could be an extremely, extremely cool thing and open up really a new type of gameplay that would perhaps appeal to people who would not normally be into PvP. So there's my thoughts on that. What I really want to hear is, what do you think would be cool with a new world PvP system? So in a world where world PvP, like the systems and all that stuff, it all works and the factions are balanced, what kind of content would you love to see in that? I'd really like to hear. So thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.